this country.
The Honourable the Treasurer.
Mr Deputy Speaker, I notice the Leader of the Opposition is always about to leave when the heat starts on his for a bit of heat, and the thing is, whenever
the member for Dundas.
Mr Deputy Speaker,
the member for Mayo.
The charge made by the Leader of the Opposition against the Prime Minister is an absence of leadership. That's the charge. Yet the Prime Minister has presided over the establishment of a new international model for Australia, a new international role for this country. That is, the very essence of leadership, has been provided to provide for Australia not the role of a closed, frightened country living behind tariff barriers and managed exchange rates, but an open society. Well, look, you were heard in peace, thank you. An open society where you could make your way in the world, and where the talent of the country was harnessed to something better, something more robust, something more interesting than the closed place we were before 1983. Now, that's what the Prime Minister has done. That's the sort of government, that's the sort of policy he's presided over, and the government presided over the government which has established it. But what do we hear from the Leader of the Opposition? And I'll refer in a few minutes, Mr Speaker, of the elements of that internationalisation. But what do we hear from the Leader of the Opposition? A very weak speech, a political speech, never any substance. No framework, any substance. No framework or framework of reference in the delivery of his speech. Only mealy-mouthed political charges levied against the government or the Prime Minister. The Leader of the Opposition is very smug, Mr Deputy Speaker. He's ahead in the polls, and so is his party. And he feels, therefore, that it's affected him in a way which produces this smugness of view from him. He can't believe his luck. And I don't doubt he doesn't believe his luck, because he has come to the leadership of the opposition because of the talent vacuum within the Liberal Party. Because obviously, with his relatively junior membership of the Parliament and of his party, he would not be leader of the Liberal Party were it not for the fact that there is a policy and talent vacuum inside that party. So all of a sudden he's got the leadership. He's got the leadership of the Liberal Party. But what did we hear from him in these supposedly key attempts to make a case against the government? In the censure he made before the last break, in this motion against the Prime Minister today, this is not an opposition leader with a frame of reference, with a mission in life, with any compelling sense of urgency about policy. I've been here to see Whitlam in opposition, Fraser in opposition, I've seen Hayden in opposition. I mean, these are people that could marshal an argument. And to give him his due, the member for Bennelong in opposition. There are people that had a framework. But I tell you what, there's no framework from the Leader of the Opposition. I mean, this is the sum total. This is the sum total.
Order the member for Mayo.
This is the sum total of his contribution. He wants a consumption tax ill-defined as to application and as to rates. He wants a state income tax, health vouchers, education vouchers, the abolition of the company tax, $3 billion in tax cuts, and if necessary to put the troops into the wharves. Now, how does that come together as a coherent whole, as a policy which continues the internationalisation of Australia? How does it? It doesn't. It doesn't amount to anything which is coherent or vaguely relevant. But what do we hear from him? We never hear any specification as to those policies or any framework from them. By contrast, this is what the government has been able to produce, Mr Deputy Speaker. First of all, the courageous decision of floating the dollar, which left us in the position of having the world market set the exchange rate. And the 30% fall in the exchange rate after 1985 produced...
Order. Members of the opposition will remain silent.
Produced a very large fall in the exchange rate, produced a 5 percentage point increase in inflation, which required real wage cuts, which the government was able to produce. We also removed exchange controls, which left Australian business free to invest abroad if they wished, and people free to invest in this country. And at the time, no one was certain how this would emerge in terms of our balance of payments or our investment and savings. What it in fact has done is to produce a great stock of international Australian companies offshore, a constellation of Australian companies where we now have $60 billion worth of assets offshore and growing offshore businesses. In the further opening of Australia, we are the only party that's removed the tariff wall. In 1988, and again more recently in the Prime Minister's speech, to see it go to 5%, to see it abolished, to see a free flow of goods as well as a free flow of funds in this country. Now, if that's not leadership, I don't know what is. If that's not leadership, taking the courageous decisions to open the place up as to funds and as to goods, if that's not leadership, then I don't know what is. And then tackling the hard issues like the structural budget deficit, the investment imbalance, getting investment going again, getting the profit share up, getting exports growing and improving the position of import competing industry, and dealing in a fundamental way through award restructuring with productivity changes and other microeconomic changes on all of the areas, the wharves, power generation. We're now looking at transport, rail freight, the things for which the coalition had just forgotten, not even thought about as being issues in Australian economic life. Now, this is the frame of reference the government's working in. And if that's not a product of leadership, then I don't know what is. But what have we heard back? Is there any speech we can refer to where the Leader of the Opposition or his deputy want to say we want to continue the internationalisation, this is how we're going to continue to improve productivity, this is the way we're going to deal with our import competing sectors, this is the way we're going to do with micro change? No. What we've got is a whole lot of grab bag policies which are not even policies. They're just things dropped in the public debate, as I said, by the visiting professor who visits the issues and drops them, doesn't even flesh them out to be policies. And then says, but he's charged against the Prime Minister. He had no capacity for tough decisions when he let Senator Newman roll him on a fee for the War Memorial, for God's sake, or failing to get through his caucus support for the assets test on the family allowance of all things. I mean, the thing is, Mr Deputy Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition has been pathetic as a leader whenever he's run into any opposition within his own party. He has no framework of reference to work in or to proselytise his party's views, and he's sitting there smugly taking comfort from the recession, hoping that he'll drift into office, as the former Leader of the Opposition, a member for Bennelong, said in some celebrated remarks in a New York hotel, "The times suit me." Well, they didn't suit him, any more than they'll suit the Leader of the Opposition or those smug people sitting with him. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, on this side of the House, look, I've said often, we have a policy ferment on this side of the House. Often I've said this, and we have. And as the Prime Minister said, he's glad we have, and so am I, because I'd rather have a discussion about issues of emphasis or indeed issues of difference than deal with the people of I mean, imagine turning up to a meeting with the opposition front bench. It'd break your heart. Break your heart to say, well, look, here they are, these intellectual slugs, we're going to try and make a government from them. I mean, for anyone interested in changing a place, it'd just break your heart. Now, that's not the position on our side of the House. And you may sit and say, oh, well, you know, we've got the government on an issue or the recession or something else, and you're rubbing your hands thinking you might slide back into public office. The fact of the matter is, you won't. We'll catch up with you like we have on 4 occasions past. And we'll catch up with you simply because we're better. We are better, much better, and much better. Person for person on our side, we are simply better. And that's why we'll be back, and that's why your hollow attack on the Prime Minister about leadership is nothing more than that, an empty attack, the seriousness of which the Leader of the Opposition left the House before even the debate was concluded. And I said to the Prime Minister earlier, and I'll say it to him again, well, I said to him privately, MPIs from you characters are not worth responding to, and I'll be counselling not to do any more in the future.